You can't sit here. This is my seat. Move!
Actually, I believe this is mine.
Mrs. Harrington, he has seat 1A.
What would you do if you walked onto a plane, found a stranger sitting in the seat you paid for, and the crew looked at you like you were the problem? Caleb Mercer stopped at the entrance of first class, his hand still wrapped around the worn leather handle of his carry-on. The cabin lights glowed soft and white. Champagne glasses clicked. Suit jackets rustled. The low hum of the aircraft wrapped around everyone like a promise of comfort. Then he saw her. A woman in a cream blazer sat in seat 2A by the window. His seat. Her legs were crossed. Her handbag rested beside her like a guard dog. She did not look lost. She looked settled. Caleb checked his boarding pass once. 2A. Phoenix to Dallas. First class. Paid in full. He stood there for one silent second, and in that second the whole cabin seemed to notice him. A tall black man in a dark jacket, grey shirt, jeans and polished shoes. No flashy watch, no assistant, no entourage, just a tired man trying to get home. But Vivian Ashford saw something else. She looked up from her phone, her pale eyes gliding over him from his shoes to his face. Her mouth tightened before he said a word. Caleb knew that look. He had seen it in bank lobbies, hotel lounges, private clubs, conference rooms with glass walls and cold smiles. It was the look people gave when they had already written a story about you and were only waiting for you to prove them right. He took a slow breath. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "I believe you're in my seat." Vivian blinked once, then gave a small laugh with no warmth in it. "I'm sorry?" Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the soft cabin noise. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A woman in row 3 glanced up from her tablet. Caleb held out his boarding pass, calm and steady. Seat 2A. Vivian did not reach for it. She only leaned back as if his paper were something unpleasant. "No," she said. "This is my seat. I always sit here." Behind Caleb, boarding slowed. A suitcase wheel squeaked. Someone exhaled too loudly. At the front galley, flight attendant Lena Hartwell turned her head. She was 33, neat uniform, tight smile, eyes trained by years of customer service to sense trouble before it became official. But even before she walked over, she had already made a choice inside her mind. The older woman looked expensive. The man looked inconvenient. Caleb felt the shift, not loud, not spoken, but real. He did not raise his voice. He did not step closer. He simply stood in the aisle with a valid ticket in his hand, carrying a secret no one in that cabin could have imagined. Vivian Ashford thought she was blocking an ordinary passenger. She had no idea she was sitting in front of the man whose company could decide the future of the airline itself. Vivian Ashford turned her face toward the window, as if Caleb Mercer had become part of the cabin noise. Beneath her polished calm, irritation moved like a shadow. She had boarded early. She had placed her handbag exactly where she wanted it. She had already claimed the view, the armrest, the small world around seat 2A. In Vivian's mind, possession was proof. Caleb waited. That was the first thing Lena Hartwell noticed when she stepped into the aisle. He was not shouting. He was not crowding anyone. He was not waving his arms or performing outrage for the room. He was simply standing there, with his boarding pass held between two fingers, his shoulders squared, his breathing slow. That made her uncomfortable. Angry passengers were easy. Calm ones were harder. Calm people made everyone else look exactly as foolish as they were. "Is there a problem here?" Lena asked, forcing brightness into her voice. Vivian turned fast, grateful for an audience. "Yes, there is," she said. "This man is harassing me over a seat." Caleb's eyes moved to Lena. They were steady, tired, and sharp. "My boarding pass says 2A, he said. "Hers appears to say another seat." I asked her to move. Vivian gave a bitter little laugh. He didn't ask. He stood over me. The man with the newspaper in one Sue lowered it another inch. Across the aisle, a retired schoolteacher named Ruth Palmer tightened her hand around the strap of her purse. She had spent 36 years reading children's faces for fear, shame, and lies. She could hear the lie in Vivian's voice before the sentence finished. Lena glanced at Vivian's phone. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Vivian's jaw flexed. For the first time, a small crack opened in her confidence. "It's on my phone," she said. "Of course." Vivian unlocked the screen with a sharp tap and thrust it toward Lena. The movement was impatient, almost royal. Lena looked down. 3C. Still first class. Still comfortable. Still paid for. But not 2A. Lena felt heat rise behind her collar. Caleb saw it. Vivian saw it too. For one thin second, truth stood in the aisle with all of them. Plain. Undeniable. Seat 2A belonged to Caleb Mercer. Then Vivian leaned closer to Lena and lowered her voice just enough to make it sound private, but not enough to keep the cabin from hearing. "Honey, I have flown this route for years. I know how this works. Just put him somewhere else." Somewhere else. The words landed softly, but Caleb felt their weight. He had been put somewhere else his whole life. Somewhere behind the decision-makers. Somewhere outside the circle. Somewhere near the door until his title was verified, his card approved, his name recognized. Not today. Lena swallowed. She looked at Caleb's boarding pass again, then at Vivian's cream blazer, diamond bracelet, and wounded expression. She thought about delay reports, passenger complaints, her supervisor's temper, the way older premium flyers wrote emails that found their way into employee files. "Mr. Mercer," Lena said carefully, "I understand this is frustrating." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "No," he said, "it isn't frustrating. It's simple." The cabin went still. Lena's smile froze. Vivian's lips parted. Caleb held up the boarding pass. "This says 2A. Her pass says 3C. That makes this very simple." A soft murmur moved through first class. Ruth Palmer nodded once, almost to herself. A younger man in row 4 lifted his phone slightly, pretending to check a message while his camera lens found the scene. Vivian sat straighter. "I will not be spoken to like this," she snapped. Caleb did not blink. "I'm speaking plainly." Lena felt control slipping away. Her fingers tightened around the tablet in her hand. She wanted the aisle clear. She wanted the door closed. She wanted the problem to become quiet, even if quiet meant unfair. "Sir," she said, voice lower now, "there are other open seats available. I can move you to another first-class seat and offer you compensation." Caleb stared at her. In that silence, Lena realized what she had just admitted. He was right. He had the seat, and she was asking him to surrender it anyway. Vivian smiled faintly, sensing victory. But Caleb only folded his boarding pass once, slow and precise, and slipped it back into his jacket. "No," he said. "One word. Clean as a blade. I paid for 2A. I selected 2A. I boarded with a valid ticket for 2A. I am not moving because someone else likes the window. Vivian's smile disappeared. Lena's breath caught. And somewhere above them, the overhead speaker crackled as boarding continued. But the real departure had already begun. Not from Phoenix to Dallas. From ordinary discomfort into something much larger, much colder, and impossible to hide. Vivian Ashford let out a sharp breath and folded her arms across her chest. "There it is," she muttered loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "People always have to make everything into a battle." Ruth Palmer raised an eyebrow. People. Not him. People. The old school teacher had heard enough coded language in her lifetime to know exactly what it sounded like. Caleb Mercer remained still. He had spent decades mastering silence. Not because silence meant weakness. Silence gave other people room to reveal themselves. And people always did. Lena Hartwell shifted uneasily. "Ma'am," she said softly, "perhaps seat 3C would be." "No." Vivian's answer cracked through the cabin. "No, absolutely not." She pointed a manicured finger toward Caleb without actually looking at him. "I boarded early. I'm comfortable. He can sit at somewhere else. This is ridiculous." Behind them, boarding had nearly stopped. Passengers entering first class slowed down, sensing tension. Some pretended not to stare. Others stared openly. A young couple in row 4 exchanged glances. A businessman closed his laptop. 2 seats back, retired Army veteran Frank Delaney quietly removed his reading glasses and watched. Lena forced a smile. "Mrs. Ashford, I understand. But no, Lena, you understand." Vivian's voice lowered. Softer. Colder. "I spend money with this airline. Real money. I know people. I fly every month. Are we seriously delaying this flight over a seat?" Then she finally looked directly at Caleb. "You've made your point. Take another seat and let everyone move on." The words hit the cabin like a slap. Frank Delaney frowned. Ruth Palmer shook her head slowly. The young couple exchanged another look. And Caleb almost smiled, not because he found it funny, because he had heard that exact sentence before. At 23, when a banker suggested another loan officer. At 32, when a hotel manager suggested another room. At 41, when a board member suggested another candidate. Take another seat. Take another office. Take another door. Move. Always move. His father used to tell him something. "Son, people can deny you respect. Never help them by denying it to yourself." Caleb inhaled slowly. "No." Vivian blinked. Lena froze. "No?" Vivian repeated. "No," Caleb said calmly. "You keep saying another seat." "There is no other seat. This one is mine." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The conviction behind it traveled farther than shouting. Lena looked around. Everyone was listening now. The atmosphere had changed. She could feel it. The crew hated scenes, and this was becoming one. "Mr. Mercer," she whispered, trying to regain control. "Please understand. I'm trying to help." Caleb turned toward her. "No, Miss Hartwell." His tone remained polite. "You're trying to avoid a complaint." Lena felt heat spread across her face. Vivian scoffed. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Then she leaned toward Caleb. "You know what your problem is?" The cabin went silent. Even Lena looked nervous. Vivian smiled. You people are always looking for something to be offended by. Ruth Palmer's eyes widened. Frank Delaney sat upright. The businessman across the aisle lowered his phone completely. A young woman near row 3 quietly pressed record. Lena's stomach dropped. "Mrs. Ashford," she whispered urgently. But Vivian was too angry now. "Look at him." She gestured openly. "Jeans, no tie, no watch, and suddenly he's acting like he owns the place." The words hung in the air. Heavy, ugly, irreversible. Lena stopped breathing. Frank Delaney muttered under his breath. "Jesus Christ." Ruth Palmer whispered, "Oh, honey." And for the first time, something flickered across Caleb's face. Not anger, disappointment, deep, old, tired. He looked at Vivian the way a doctor might look at an illness he'd seen too many times. "You know what's interesting?" Caleb said quietly. Vivian smirked. "What?" "You saw me for less than 30 seconds. His eyes never left hers. And somehow, you decided who I was." The young woman in row 3 held her phone higher. Frank Delaney reached for his own. Ruth Palmer sat forward. Because something had changed. This wasn't about seat 2A anymore, and everyone in first class could feel it, including Lena Hartwell, because standing in front of her wasn't an angry passenger. He was too controlled, too composed, too comfortable under pressure. And something deep inside her suddenly whispered a terrifying thought. Who exactly is this man? But before she could answer that question, a new voice came from the front galley. "What seems to be the problem here?" And every head in first class turned. The man who stepped out of the front galley wore a dark vest, a silver name pin, and the tired expression of someone who believed every problem on an airplane could be solved by pressure. His name was Nolan Pierce. He was the senior cabin manager, 46 years old, polished in the way airline veterans often were. Smooth hair, controlled smile, eyes that measured people in less than a second. He had spent 18 years handling complaints, delays, nervous flyers, entitled passengers, and crew mistakes. He had learned how to sound calm while choosing sides before the facts arrived. Now his eyes moved across the scene. Vivian Ashford, seated by the window, face flushed, hand pressed dramatically against her chest. Lena Hartwell standing stiff in the aisle, holding her tablet like a shield. Caleb Mercer standing beside them, quiet, tall, and unmoving. Nolan did not like what he saw. Not because Vivian was wrong, because Caleb looked too calm. That kind of calm challenged authority. "What seems to be the issue?" Nolan asked again. Vivian answered before anyone else could breathe. "This man is intimidating me," she said. "I was seated peacefully, and he started demanding I move." Ruth Palmer made a soft sound of disbelief. Frank Delaney leaned forward. "That's not what happened," Frank said. Nolan's eyes flicked to him. "Sir, please remain seated." Frank's jaw tightened, but he sat back. He had taken orders his whole life. He knew the difference between authority and wisdom. This was not wisdom. Caleb spoke next. "My boarding pass shows seat 2A. Mrs. Ashford's shows 3C. I asked her to move to her assigned seat." Nolan extended one hand. "May I see your pass?" Caleb handed it over. Nolan looked down. 2A. His mouth tightened. Then he turned to Lena. "And Mrs. Ashford?" Lena hesitated. That hesitation said more than a report ever could. Her pass shows 3C, she admitted. The cabin heard it. Phones rose another inch. Vivian's face hardened. But I always sit there, she snapped. And I have never been treated this way in my life. Caleb looked at her and thought of all the people who confused discomfort with oppression. A woman being told to sit in the seat she paid for had called it mistreatment. A man being asked to surrender what was his had been called the problem. That was how bias worked. It reversed gravity. It made the person standing on solid ground look like the one causing the fall. Nolan returned Caleb's boarding pass, but he did not hand the seat back with it. "Mr. Mercer," he said carefully, "in the interest of an on-time departure, I'm going to ask for your cooperation." Caleb's eyes sharpened. "My cooperation?" "Yes, sir." Nolan's tone stayed professional, but something beneath it hardened. "We can seat you in 3C. It is still first class. I'll authorize additional miles and a meal credit." Vivian leaned back, satisfaction glowing faintly in her eyes. Lena looked away. Ruth Palmer whispered, "Unbelievable." Caleb did not move. The words settled around him like cold smoke. 3C. The seat Vivian should have taken from the beginning. They were not solving the problem. They were rewarding it. "Let me make sure I understand," Caleb said. His voice was low now, dangerously soft. "You have confirmed that I am assigned to 2A. Nolan swallowed. "Yes. You have confirmed that Mrs. Ashford is assigned to 3C. "Yes, sir. And your solution is to move me." A silence dropped. Even the air vents seemed quieter. Nolan blinked once. "I'm asking you to help us avoid further disruption." Caleb looked around the cabin, at the passengers watching, at the phones recording, at Lena's tight face, at Vivian's satisfied smile, then back at Nolan. "The disruption is sitting in my seat." Vivian gasped. "How dare you?" Caleb did not look at her. Nolan's smile disappeared. "Sir, I need you to lower your tone." Ruth Palmer sat up straight. He didn't raise it. Nolan ignored her. Caleb's face remained still, but inside him something old began to move. Not rage. Rage was messy. This was colder, cleaner, the kind of anger that did not explode. It documented. It remembered. It waited. "Nolan Pierce," Caleb said, reading the name Pin. "Are you officially instructing me to leave my paid assigned first-class seat so another passenger can keep it because she prefers it?" Nolan's eyes narrowed. "I'm instructing you to comply with crew direction." There it was. The turn. From customer service to command, from fairness to obedience, from facts to force. Lena felt it too. Her fingers trembled around the tablet. She wanted to speak. She wanted to say this had gone too far, but fear pressed her lips shut. Vivian saw only victory. Caleb saw the whole machine. And for the first time that morning, he reached into his jacket and touched his phone. Not to call yet, not to reveal, not to end it, just to remind himself that power did not always need to announce itself. Sometimes power waited until everyone else had finished exposing who they really were. Nolan Pierce heard the question, but he did not answer it. That was his first mistake. A man can survive being wrong. He can apologize. He can correct course. He can step back before the edge gives way. But Nolan did what small authorities often do when truth corners them. He reached for power. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice flattening, "I'm going to need you to step out of the aisle." Caleb looked at the empty seat blocked by Vivian's body. "I'll step out of the aisle when I sit down." Vivian scoffed. "Do you hear him? He's refusing crew instructions." There it was again, the performance, the trembling voice without fear, the injury without harm. Vivian Ashford knew how to turn refusal into danger, and she did it with the ease of someone who had been believed her entire life. Lena Hartwell's eyes moved from Vivian to Caleb. Something in her face had changed. The certainty was gone. In its place was a thin layer of dread. She knew the facts. She knew the seat assignment. She knew who was being asked to sacrifice. But knowing the truth and defending it were different kinds of courage. Nolan stepped closer. "Sir, I need you to understand something. Once a crew member gives a lawful instruction, failure to comply can result in removal from the aircraft." The word removal moved through the cabin like cold air. Frank Delaney sat forward again. "For what?" he asked. "For having the right seat?" Nolan turned sharply. "Sir, remain seated." Frank's eyes hardened. "I am seated." A few passengers murmured. The young woman in row 3, whose name was Emily Carter, lifted her phone openly now. She was 39, a nurse from Tempe, flying to Dallas to see her first grandchild. She had spent her life watching people in pain pretend they were fine. Caleb's calm did not fool her. She saw the wound underneath it. Not fresh, not bleeding. Older than the flight. Older than the seat. Her thumb tapped record. Vivian noticed. "Are you filming me?" she snapped. Emily's voice was quiet. "I'm filming what's happening." Vivian turned to Nolan. "You need to stop that." "I don't consent." Emily did not lower the phone. "This is a public cabin," she said. Nolan's face tightened. Now the situation had become something he could not control with a smile. Phones changed everything. Phones gave memory to moments powerful people preferred to erase. Lena leaned toward Nolan and whispered, "His pass is valid. We should just ask Mrs. Ashford to move." Nolan's jaw twitched. He heard her. Caleb heard her. Vivian heard her too. And for 1 second, Vivian's eyes flashed with something sharper than anger. Betrayal. Not because Lena had wronged her. Because Lena had almost treated Caleb fairly. "I cannot believe this," Vivian said, voice rising. "I am being humiliated because he wants to prove a point." Caleb finally turned toward her. "No, Mrs. Ashford. You are being asked to sit in your assigned seat." Simple words, no insult, no heat. That made them worse. Vivian's face reddened. "You don't get to talk down to me. I'm not talking down to you." Caleb's voice dropped. "I'm refusing to disappear for you." The cabin went silent. Even Nolan blinked. Those words cut deeper than the argument. They named the thing everyone had been circling. They dragged the invisible into the fluorescent light. Lena looked down. Emily's phone stayed steady. Frank nodded once. Ruth Palmer pressed a hand to her chest. Nolan cleared his throat, trying to recover the room. "Mr. Mercer, this is your final opportunity to resolve this peacefully. Take seat 3C, or I will notify the captain that you are refusing crew direction." Caleb stared at him. His hand moved into his jacket, and this time came out with his phone. Not fast, not threatening, deliberate. Nolan stiffened, Sir, what are you doing? Caleb glanced at the screen. One unread message from Marissa Cole, his chief operating officer. Board packet ready. Meridian Air Partnership call moved up. They're eager. Caleb read it once. Then he locked the screen. He did not need to call yet. Not yet. He looked at Nolan, Lena, Vivian, and the silent passengers who now understood they were witnessing more than a seating dispute. Notify whoever you need to notify, Caleb said. Nolan stared at him. You're choosing removal. Caleb's expression did not change. No. He slid the phone back into his jacket. I'm choosing the record. Nolan Pierce stepped away just far enough to press 2 fingers against the service phone near the galley, but not far enough to leave the drama behind. He wanted Caleb to see him do it. That was part of the performance. Authority often needed witnesses. Captain Reeves, Nolan said into the handset, voice low and controlled. We have a passenger in first class refusing crew instruction. Seat 2A. I may need assistance. Lena Hartwell closed her eyes for half a second. Refusing crew instruction. That phrase was clean, official, dangerous. It erased everything that came before it. It erased Vivian sitting in the wrong seat. It erased the valid boarding pass. It erased the whispered insult, the public pressure, the unequal burden. It turned Caleb Mercer from a wronged passenger into an operational problem. Caleb watched Nolan speak and felt no surprise. Only a familiar sadness, sharpened by discipline. He had seen institutions do this his entire adult life. The moment the facts became inconvenient, they changed the category. A complaint became disruption. A question became aggression. A refusal to be mistreated became non-compliance. Vivian Ashford adjusted her bracelet and looked toward the window. But her breathing had changed. Faster now. Her victory was no longer clean. Too many phones, too many eyes, too many witnesses who were not behaving the way she expected. Ruth Palmer leaned toward Emily Carter. Keep recording, she whispered. Emily nodded without looking away from the screen. Frank Delaney pulled his phone out too. His hands were large and stiff from arthritis, but steady enough. He had buried friends who were never believed until documents appeared. He knew evidence mattered. At the front of the cabin, Captain Graham Reeves stepped out of the cockpit. He was 58, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, a man with the severe stillness of command. His uniform looked carved onto him. 4 gold stripes caught the cabin light as he walked down the aisle. Passengers quieted at once. Captains changed the temperature of a room. Graham Reeves knew that. He used it. What's going on here? He asked. Nolan spoke first. Passenger is refusing to move from the aisle after being offered alternate seating. He has been argumentative and non-compliant. Lena's head snapped toward Nolan. Caleb saw it. So did Emily's camera. Vivian added quickly. He made me feel unsafe. The word unsafe struck harder than anything before it. It was the word that opened doors no truth could easily close. Captain Reeves turned to Caleb. Sir, I'm Captain Reeves. I understand there's a problem. Caleb looked at him with measured calm. There is. A passenger is sitting in my assigned seat. Your crew confirmed it. Instead of moving her, they are asking me to surrender the seat. Reeves glanced at Nolan. Nolan's face stayed flat. It's more complicated than that, Captain. No, Caleb said. The cabin tightened. It is not. Reeves stared at him. Sir, I need you to be very careful with your tone. Frank Delaney muttered. His tone is fine. Reeves ignored him. Caleb could feel the machinery closing around him now. Not metal, not doors. Human machinery. Assumption, hierarchy, reputation, fear. Each piece clicking into place. He knew exactly what would happen next if he gave them anger. So he gave them precision. Captain, I have a valid boarding pass for seat 2A. I have not threatened anyone. I have not touched anyone. I have not raised my voice. I have asked to sit in the seat I paid for. That is the full issue. Reeves looked at him for a long second. Then at Vivian. Then at Lena. Is his boarding pass valid? The captain asked. Lena swallowed. Yes, Captain. Is Mrs. Ashford assigned to 3C? Lena's voice nearly broke. Yes. The truth stood up again. This time wearing a uniform's attention. For a brief moment, Captain Reeves had a choice. He could end it. He could ask Vivian to move. He could protect the dignity of the passenger who had done everything right. Instead, he looked at the phones. He looked at the delayed boarding line. He looked at the woman by the window, whose complaint would likely arrive before dinner. Then he looked back at Caleb. Sir, he said, I'm going to ask you one final time to accept the alternate seat so we can depart. Emily inhaled sharply. Ruth whispered, No. Vivian's lips curved. Lena went pale. Caleb's eyes did not move. The captain had confirmed the truth and chosen against it. That was the moment the story changed forever. Caleb reached slowly into his jacket again and took out his phone. This time, he unlocked it. Caleb's thumb hovered over the screen for one silent second. Every camera in first class seemed to lean closer. Vivian Ashford watched him with a tight, mocking smile, still convinced this was theatre. Men like him, in her mind, always had to perform. They always had to prove. They always had to call someone and make noise because they had nothing real behind them. Captain Graham Reeves saw something different. He saw Caleb's hands. They were steady. Too steady. Passengers who bluffed usually rushed. They spoke fast. They threatened lawsuits with trembling voices. Caleb did none of that. He scrolled with the quiet focus of a man opening a door that had always belonged to him. Lena Hartwell felt her throat tighten. She saw the name on his phone before he tapped it. Marissa Cole. Under it, in smaller letters, Chief Operating Officer. Her stomach dropped, though she did not yet know why. The call connected on the first ring. Caleb, a woman's voice said, crisp and alert. Are you boarding? Caleb kept his eyes on Captain Reeves. I'm on board. There's a situation. The cabin held its breath. Marissa Cole did not ask if he was overreacting. She had worked beside Caleb Mercer for 9 years. She knew his voice in crisis. Quiet meant serious. Calm meant dangerous. What happened? I'm on Meridian Air Flight 628 from Phoenix to Dallas. First class, seat 2A. Another passenger is seated there. Crew confirmed my boarding pass is valid. They confirmed hers is for 3C. They are now asking me to move and framing my refusal as non-compliance. The words were clean, exact, surgical. Emily Carter kept recording. Frank Delaney whispered, Good. Captain Reeves's face changed slightly at the airline name spoken with that tone. Not the tone of a customer. the tone of someone dictating facts for a record. Marissa's voice cooled. "Are you safe?" Caleb's eyes shifted briefly to Vivian. "I am being labeled unsafe." A pause, short, sharp. Then Marissa said, "Put me on speaker." Caleb tapped the screen. The voice filled the first-class cabin. "This is Marissa Cole, Chief Operating Officer of Mercer Dynamics. Who is the senior airline representative present?" The air seemed to crack. Nolan Pierce stared at the phone. Lena's face went pale. Captain Reeves's posture stiffened. Vivian blinked, the first visible fracture in her certainty. Nolan cleared his throat. "This is Nolan Pierce, Senior Cabin Manager." "And the captain?" Graham Reeves stepped forward. "Captain Graham Reeves." Marissa did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Captain Reeves, Nolan, I need you to understand that this call is being documented by our legal and corporate affairs teams. Caleb Mercer is the founder and chief executive officer of Mercer Dynamics. Your executive office is currently in final stage negotiations with our company for a fleet-wide customer systems modernization contract." No one moved. Even Vivian stopped breathing. Mercer Dynamics. The name traveled through the cabin like a live wire. A businessman in row 4 looked up sharply. He knew the company. Most people who followed business did. Artificial intelligence logistics. Passenger service automation. Bias detection software. A company valued in the billions. A company airlines wanted, feared, and needed. And its CEO was standing in the aisle with a boarding pass they had tried to ignore. Marissa continued. "Before this call proceeds, I want a clear answer. Did your crew confirm that Mr. Mercer is assigned to seat 2A? Captain Reeves's jaw worked once. "Yes." "Did your crew confirm that the other passenger is assigned to seat 3C? Another silence. "Yes." "Then why is Mr. Mercer being asked to move?" No one answered. That silence was louder than any confession. Vivian's eyes darted from face to face. Her hand slid off her bracelet. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked smaller now, not because Caleb had humiliated her, but because truth had removed the stage she had been performing on. Lena stared at the floor. Nolan's face flushed dark red. Captain Reeves looked suddenly older. Marissa's voice sharpened. "Captain Reeves, I suggest you correct this immediately. Not quietly, not privately, clearly, in front of the witnesses who watched this happen." Caleb lowered the phone slightly. His face had not changed. No triumph, no smile. Only the grave stillness of a man who had waited long enough for people to reveal the cost of their assumptions. Then Vivian Ashford whispered the first honest thing she had said since boarding. "Oh my God." Captain Reeves stared at Caleb's phone as if it had become a live grenade in the middle of the aisle. For the first time since stepping out of the cockpit, he did not look in command. He looked trapped. Marissa Cole's voice remained on speaker, calm enough to make the silence worse. "Captain Reeves," she said. "I'm waiting." Reeves glanced toward Nolan Pierce. Nolan glanced toward Lena. Lena looked at Vivian Ashford. Vivian looked anywhere but Caleb. Power had shifted so quickly it left fingerprints on every face. Reeves cleared his throat. "Ms. Cole, I understand your concern, but aircraft operations are under my authority." "No one is disputing your authority," Marissa replied. "We are documenting your judgment. The sentence landed hard. Judgment, not procedure, not policy. Judgment. That was what this had always been. A judgment made in the aisle. A judgment made through clothing, skin, posture, age, accent, assumptions. A judgment that had now been placed under glass. Caleb lowered the phone slightly, but kept the call active. Captain Reeves turned toward Vivian. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, and his voice had lost its earlier hardness. "You'll need to move to your assigned seat." Vivian's head snapped up. "What?" "Seat 3C, Reeves said. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "You cannot be serious." "I am." Vivian looked toward Nolan for rescue. Nolan looked at the floor. She looked toward Lena. Lena's eyes were wet, though she was fighting hard not to show it. "This is absurd," Vivian said. "After all of this, you're embarrassing me." Ruth Palmer spoke from across the aisle. "No, ma'am. You did that yourself." A few passengers murmured in agreement. Vivian's face burned. Frank Delaney's phone stayed raised, his expression carved from stone. Emily Carter kept recording, but her eyes were not cold. They were sad. She had seen people unravel when the world finally stopped protecting their version of reality. It was not pretty, but it was necessary. Vivian gathered her handbag with stiff, jerking movements. The expensive leather scraped against the seat console. Her fingers trembled as she stood. For one brief moment, she was in the aisle beside Caleb, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Powder, citrus, panic. She did not look at him. "I didn't know who you were," she whispered. Caleb turned his head slightly. "That was never the problem." Vivian froze. Those 6 words stripped away her last defense. Because he was right. The problem was not that she had failed to recognize wealth. The problem was that she had failed to recognize humanity. She moved to 3C, each step watched by the cabin she had once expected to command. Lena stepped forward quickly and wiped the seat with a fresh cloth, though it did not need wiping. Her hands moved with nervous precision. Service as apology, gesture as confession. "Mr. Mercer," she said softly, "your seat is ready." Caleb looked at her. For a moment, Lena expected anger. She almost wanted it. Anger would let her apologize to something loud. But Caleb gave her something harder to face. Disappointment. "Thank you," he said. No warmth. No cruelty. Just finality. He sat down in seat 2A. The cabin seemed to exhale. But Marissa was not finished. "Captain Reeves," she said through the speaker, "please confirm that Mr. Mercer is now seated in his assigned seat." Reeves's face tightened. "He is seated in 2A, and please confirm that the delay and escalation resulted from your crew's decision to ask the valid ticket holder to move instead of enforcing the actual seat assignment." Nolan looked up sharply. "That's not fair," he said. Caleb's eyes lifted. Marissa answered before he could. "Fairness was available before you called him non-compliant." Nolan said nothing. Lena looked like the words had struck her directly in the chest. Because they had. The truth did not need volume. It needed timing. Caleb ended the call only after Marissa said, "Legal will follow up. Do not delete any internal notes, passenger records, or crew communications related to this incident." The screen went dark. The cabin stayed silent. Then somewhere in row 4, the businessman who had recognized Mercer Dynamics, whispered to the person beside him. "That's Caleb Mercer." The name spread in low waves. Caleb looked out the window. The jet bridge still clung to the aircraft. The plane had not moved an inch, but everything inside it had. The whisper moved faster than the flight attendants could stop it. Caleb Mercer. Mercer Dynamics. The CEO. The man in 2A. The words traveled seat to seat, carried by lowered voices and widened eyes. A few passengers searched his name on their phones. Screens glowed in the dim first-class cabin. Faces changed as search results appeared. Magazine covers, conference photos, a keynote speech in Washington. A business profile describing him as one of the most influential technology leaders in American aviation systems. Vivian Ashford sat in 3C as if the seat had turned to ice beneath her. Her handbag rested on her lap now, both hands gripping it. The same hands that had dismissed him, the same fingers that had waved him away. Her eyes darted toward Caleb, then away, toward the window, then down at her own reflection in the black glass of her phone. She had thought power looked a certain way. A watch, a suit, a certain voice, a certain skin. And now power sat 2 rows ahead of her, silent, controlled, and impossible to deny. Lena Hartwell moved through the cabin with the stiff grace of someone trying not to fall apart. She offered water, took coats, checked overhead bins. Every action was correct, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled when she touched the service cart. They shook when she folded napkins. She could still hear Marissa Cole's words in her head. Fairness was available before you called him non-compliant. Lena had never thought of herself as cruel. That was the part that hurt. She donated to school drives. She checked on elderly passengers. She remembered nervous children's names. She called herself fair because she did not use ugly words. But today she had watched ugly behavior unfold and tried to make the quiet man pay for it. That truth sat inside her like a stone. Captain Reeves returned to the cockpit, but his authority did not return with him. Nolan Pierce stayed near the galley, pretending to review a tablet. His thumb swiped across the screen without reading a thing. His pulse hammered at the side of his neck. He knew the corporate structure of Meridian Air well enough to understand what Mercer Dynamics meant. The airline had been chasing that contract for months. A full customer experience overhaul, predictive delay support, automated complaint triage, crew behavior analytics, bias detection tools built to flag patterns before lawsuits found them. And now the man who owned those tools had personally witnessed the exact disease his company claimed it could diagnose. Nolan felt sweat gather beneath his collar. His career had not ended yet. But he could hear the clock start. Ruth Palmer leaned across the aisle toward Caleb. "Mr. Mercer," she said gently. Caleb turned from the window. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry you had to endure that." Her voice was not dramatic, not performative. It had the deep softness of someone who meant every word. Caleb studied her face, wrinkles around kind eyes. A wedding band worn thin, hands folded thoughtfully over a paperback novel. "Thank you," he said. Frank Delaney lifted his phone slightly. "I recorded most of it," he said, "if you need it." Emily Carter added, "I did too." Others nodded. Quietly, awkwardly, like people waking from a spell and realizing their silence had been part of the room. Caleb looked around the cabin. He did not look grateful. He looked measured. "I appreciate that," he said. "But I hope the airline reviews its own records first." The sentence made Lena stop mid-step. Its own records. Not just passenger videos, crew logs, seat scans, tablet entries, service phone calls, internal chat notes. The kind of evidence employees forgot existed until someone powerful asked for it. Vivian's throat tightened. Nolan looked up. At that exact moment, the gate agent appeared at the aircraft door. Her name was Denise Lowell, and her face had the pale focus of someone who had just received a call from far above her pay grade. She walked quickly to Nolan and whispered into his ear. Nolan's expression changed, first confusion, then disbelief, then fear. Denise stepped back and looked toward Caleb. "Mr. Mercer," she said, voice careful, "Meridian Air Executive Operations is requesting that this aircraft hold at the gate." A low murmur spread through first class. Captain Reeves's voice came sharply from the cockpit door. "Hold for what reason?" Denise swallowed. Her eyes flicked to Vivian, then Nolan, then Lena. "Pending immediate review of a passenger discrimination incident." The words struck the cabin like thunder. No one spoke. Even the engines seemed to go quiet. Caleb turned back toward the window. Outside, the jet bridge remained locked against the plane. Inside, every person understood the same thing. This flight was no longer delayed by Caleb Mercer. It was delayed by the truth. Denise Lowell stood at the aircraft door with one hand pressed against her radio, listening to a voice the passengers could not hear. Her face told them enough. Something official had begun. Captain Reeves stepped out again, his jaw tight. "Denise," he said, "who ordered the hold?" "Executive Operations," she replied. "For a seat dispute?" Her eyes lifted. "For a discrimination review?" The word discrimination moved through the cabin with brutal clarity. It did not whisper this time. It did not hide inside tone, preference, comfort, or procedure. It stood in the aisle and named itself. Vivian Ashford lowered her head. Nolan Pierce looked as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. Lena Hartwell turned toward the galley and pressed both palms against the counter. She inhaled once. Shallow. Broken. The room seemed to tilt around her. Caleb Mercer remained in seat 2A, seatbelt unfastened, hands resting on the armrests. He did not celebrate. He did not look around for approval. That unsettled people most of all. His restraint had weight. His silence judged louder than anger. A few minutes later, 2 Meridian Air corporate representatives stepped onto the plane. One was a tall black woman in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled into a smooth, low bun, tablet tucked beneath her arm. Her name was Allison Grant, Vice President of Customer Integrity. The other was a white man in his early 50s named Peter Walsh, Regional Operations Director, his face pale with corporate dread. They did not look at Vivian first. They looked at Caleb. "Mr. Mercer," Allison said, stopping beside his seat. "I'm Allison Grant with Meridian Air. I want to apologize for what occurred on this aircraft." Caleb studied her. "Thank you." Peter cleared his throat. "We are going to conduct an immediate review before this flight departs." Captain Reeves stepped forward. "With respect, this is my aircraft." Allison turned to him slowly. "And this is our company." The sentence was quiet, devastating. Reeves fell silent. Allison looked toward Nolan. "Mr. Pierce, please step into the galley." Nolan opened his mouth. No words came. He followed her. Peter turned to Lena. "Miss Hartwell, you as well." Lena nodded, eyes shining. As she passed Caleb, she stopped. "Mr. Mercer," she whispered. "I should have moved her immediately." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. The answer hit harder than forgiveness would have. Lena swallowed and walked on. Vivian sat rigid in 3C, trying to disappear into the leather. She had spent the morning insisting Caleb should sit somewhere else. Now she wanted nothing more than invisibility. Allison returned after several minutes, her expression controlled but severe. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, "we need to speak with you at the gate." Vivian looked up. "Me?" "Yes, ma'am." "I have done nothing wrong." Ruth Palmer gave a tired sigh. Frank Delaney muttered, "Still?" Allison's face did not change. "Your statements and conduct are part of the review." Vivian's voice broke. "I didn't know he was important." A hush fell. Caleb closed his eyes for one brief second. There it was again. The confession beneath the excuse. Allison's gaze hardened. "Every passenger is important, Mrs. Ashford." The cabin absorbed that sentence like a verdict. Vivian stood, unsteady. Her handbag slipped from her lap and struck the floor with a dull thud. No one rushed to pick it up. She bent slowly and gathered it herself. As she walked toward the front, cameras followed. Not cruelly, not gleefully, simply as witnesses, the kind she had wanted when she thought the story favored her. Nolan Pierce did not return to the cabin. Lena did, but without her service smile. She moved quietly, respectfully, and when she reached Caleb's row, she placed a glass of water on his side table. No speech, no performance, just water. Human. Late, but human. The flight eventually departed nearly an hour behind schedule, but by then the video was already spreading. Emily Carter's recording. Frank Delaney's angle. Ruth Palmer's statement. The quiet CEO in seat 2A, who had been asked to move for a woman in the wrong seat. By the time the wheels lifted off the runway, Meridian Air's executive office had issued its first internal suspension notices. By the time the plane crossed New Mexico, Mercer Dynamics had paused contract negotiations. By the time Caleb landed in Dallas, the story had become larger than one seat. It had become a mirror for every counter, cabin, lobby, boardroom, and gate where people still decide who belongs before they know a name. Caleb Mercer stepped off the plane without raising his voice once. That was the part people remembered, not the power, not the title, the control, the dignity, the refusal to disappear. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories about courage and accountability, and comment with 3 words in English: respect every passenger.